Good afternoon, everybody. My apologies for a slightly later start. Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Built Environment Networking. Busy old start to 2021. Hope it's been a positive one for you all, despite the rather negative vibes that COVID brings. Lots going on, and we can see some light at the end of the tunnel. Today's webinar is a little bit different to our usual webinar topics and is titled UAE Property and Construction Market Analysis and Opportunities. My name is Phil Laycock. I'm hosting the webinar today. We've run nearly 400 online events during lockdown, nearly 100 events so far in 2021. We've had a very busy start to the year, covering events across the UK and also different parts of the world as well, looking at different sectors and different communities. So we've had some very positive conversations, and I feel confident that they will continue as well today. So before we start, I would like to thank our national partners, Wilmot Dixon, Newformer, CLS, Cornerstone, Pagabo Group of companies, including Cypro and SPC, View City, Socotech, Waterman, Barber ABI, Faithful and Gould, CLS, and Lead Associates. I think we've all become fairly proficient at webinars and online conferences, but I do want to make sure that you get the most out of today and understand the platform. So first and foremost, I'd like you to go to the top right-hand corner and click on your initials. If you edit your profile, you can add in a photo, you can put your LinkedIn profile address in there, but we'd also like you to, after your surname, if you can put a hyphen and then put your company name, it makes it very easy for people to see who you work for. So when you're engaging or when you're asking questions, it's very easy for me to give you a plug, give your companies a plug anyway. So the main stage is where we are now. This is where we're going to host the presentation for today. And just to let you know how the chat function works, so we have on the main stage, we have a Q&A function on there, and that's where we'd like you to put your questions for today's speakers. So on to today's webinar. Dubai has seen incredible growth in the last 18 years, growing from 156,000 to 560,000 households. This is expected to continue over the next 16 years. And Oxford Economics predict that the 176,000 more households will be created over this period. So the UAE announced in August that it will deliver a three-stage flexible package of measures to strengthen the economy, including steps to support construction and investment. So developmental areas include boosting hospitality, retail, and industrial and logistics, as well as office and residential. So the British government is urging UK companies to strike out into the overseas market and form business relationships with countries outside of the EU as part of its post-Brexit strategy. There are innumerable construction opportunities overseas. And at this webinar today, we're going to hear from some country experts on how to get started when operating in the UAE and how to approach procurement and how to get started. So joining me on our virtual stage today are Kaveh Samsamy, who is a senior partner at Knight Frank. Vasu Motta is design director, master planning in the Middle East at Atkins. And Dr. Mohammed Hegassi is senior technical director at WSP. We're having a few problems with Mohammed, but we're working behind the scenes to try and get him on. Please do ask questions via the main stage Q&A. And up first, I would like to hand over to Kaveh from Knight Frank.
Thank you very much, Phil. Really appreciate it. Just to give everybody a quick background, my name is Kaveh. I'm the senior partner of Knight Frank. I handle the development management service line for the entire GCC region. So me and my colleagues, client-side senior development professionals, and we've joined Knight Frank to now offer development management services on a consultancy basis to developers, investors, and investment funds here in the GCC region. I will just share my screen and get started with the presentation. Hopefully everybody can see this. Phil, is it showing just before I start?
It's showing. If you could just click on the hide button just to the right of stop sharing, that'll close that box, but it's all good, Kaveh. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I've divided the presentation into three main categories. The first will provide a market overview, and then I get into some construction-related trends, in case there are suppliers and sort of contractors that are on the webinar. And then finally, development trends, which would be more applicable to real estate developers who are coming in the market. In general, what I've done is tried to give an introduction by analyzing sort of, how things work in international and Western markets, of which everybody I'm sure is familiar, versus the market. Many of these bullets actually apply to the entire GCC, but some of them don't, and I can highlight those as we go along. So to jump right into it, I think that in terms of real estate demand drivers, probably the most critical difference between international and Western markets versus the UAE is that in more mature markets, international Western markets, the demand is driven primarily by the growth in the indigenous population, internal economics, national and regional economic metrics, whereas in the UAE, it's very much driven by the incoming expatriate population and by foreign direct investment. It's very common in the UAE market to have a significant supply potential market held by foreign investors who either visit once or twice a year, perhaps never even visit the UAE, and they could potentially own hundreds of units of residential. They could own entire office buildings, hotels. So the UAE, being very similar to a Singapore style economic model, is much more heavily reliant on foreign direct investment. The Emirati population makes up something like 11% of the total. So, that's nearly 90% of the population is expatriates. So to the extent that expatriates immigrate into the country, demand is created. When expatriates leave, this really affects the real estate market, and demand slows significantly. The second biggest difference is that in international markets, demand is led primarily by private sector economic metrics. In the UAE, demand is really created by two things. The first is that the public sector policy continuously has been evolving and changing over the past 10 years, and there's other sort of policy changes that are coming in the next 10 years. For example, back in the mid-2000s, foreign property ownership was allowed in the UAE. That actually was a significant driver for demand for real estate. And in addition, in the UAE, there's really large-scale public investment initiatives, whether it's Jebel Ali Port or even the development of Burj Khalifa, things like that, iconic projects. And so really the market is created by the public sector, and the private sector is a support mechanism, which is very different from international markets. In terms of geopolitical factors, obviously Brexit notwithstanding, doesn't have a huge effect on demand. But geopolitical factors are actually probably the major driving force behind demand in the UAE. The UAE being a safe haven in the Middle East, within a kilometer radius, you have a lot of wealthy individuals, a huge population, and very difficult geopolitical conditions. Everything from Iranian nationals, Pakistani, Iraqi, Syrian, anybody that basically has wealth within the Middle East region tends to bring that capital into the UAE. And so the UAE has actually benefited from the geopolitical instability of its neighbors, and it is a major driving force behind demand. The other thing is that demand for investment product obviously is mostly yield driven in international and Western markets. In the UAE, it's a very, very different dynamic. Yield is considered, but it's not really the primary factor when making an investment decision. As I talked about, the capital safe haven dynamic is probably the biggest factor. The second one is that culturally, among high net worth Gulf nationals, Gulf Arab nationals, they really favor real estate as an asset class historically throughout the Middle East and in the Arab culture and in the Muslim culture. Stock markets and sort of alternative investments far, far less popular. So, in terms of the indigenous wealth in the Gulf region, it disproportionately goes into real estate, whether or not there's a yield. It's looked at as a status symbol to own real estate. It's looked at as a long-term investment. It's looked at as far superior to any other asset class as a percentage compared to Western markets. So that's also a very big difference. And I think the fifth key difference is that availability of capital within Western markets is a significant demand driver. That's just simply not the case here. Capital is always available, it's always abundant. It's concentrated either in private hands or government-based companies. So availability of capital, it's, whereas in Western markets, sort of, how much capital flows into the market has a major effect on pricing and supply demand. That's simply not the case here. Capital is relative to the size of the market, always available, I would say, in perpetuity. So it's simply something that we don't need to consider in this market. Moving into development and sort of what I would call project delivery common practices, kind of what I've already highlighted. Majority of development obviously funded and delivered by the private sector in the West. And here in the UAE, the vast majority is delivered by what we call government-related entities, or GREs. Now, these are actual private sector corporations, but the shareholding is held in the majority by the government or wholly by the government. Emar, Nakhil, Aldar, all these companies you've heard of, these are GREs, government-related entities. And they actually deploy the majority of the capital into the development space, and they're also responsible for delivering majority of the actual built product that comes to market. Another very important difference is that in Western markets, political considerations and the entitlement process for a new development project is very lengthy. You have, your city council, your neighborhood council, multi-layered approval, yada, yada, yada. In the UAE, we have none of that. Basically, when you purchase land from a master developer, your land is already entitled. You don't have to go through any land entitlement process. So this condenses the development timeline, is one of the reasons why the UAE has been able to achieve such a high rate of product delivery to the market, is that simply there's no representative political bodies that you need to deal with here in the UAE. In addition, there's a multi-layered, I would say, regulation process in international and Western markets. Federal, state, local, environmental, sometimes there's a social benefit. You have to pay a living wage, this, that, and the other thing. Here in the UAE, it's completely different. There's one local authority. It's a single regulatory process. And basically, it's only in terms of design, approval from a structural and MEP standpoint. That's it. You don't have to go through all of the lengthy approval processes. So essentially, the timeline for approvals and the development risk that's associated with that is essentially non-existent here in the UAE. I think another big difference is that I would say large and complex development projects, typically you'd see more sophisticated funding mechanisms. Mezzanine financing is obviously common in Western markets, not common at all in the UAE. Basically, you have a bank loan and everything else is funded by developer equity. Again, that's because, first of all, you have these high net worth families and individuals. The government obviously is developing a lot, so capital is available. Very, very simple funding mechanisms. You don't have this sort of sophisticated different tranches of layering of development financing. Simply doesn't exist here, at least not yet. And I think that the last one that's very critical is that in the UAE, there's a very well-established off-plan sales system. So essentially, a developer, by registering their project with the Real Estate Regulatory Authority, can essentially pay for a concept design. Okay, they have to purchase the land, pay for a concept design, and then they're allowed to start selling units and actually collecting money from buyers. Now, that money goes into an escrow account, which is used to pay the contractor. But what it comes down to is that something around 70% of the total construction cost can actually come from unit buyers. People who buy units will actually pay money into the development project before receiving their units, huge amounts of that. In recent years, that's been changing, and developers have been looking at more sort of post-handover payment plans. But the legal and regulatory ability to collect a significant amount of the construction costs before delivering the unit to the buyer does exist in the UAE. And I think that's a very big difference in terms of UAE versus the Western markets. Moving into construction, especially in the United States where I'm from, steel, anything above 4 stories, you have to use steel frame. I was shocked when I first came to the UAE over 15 years ago that just simply doesn't exist here. The local building codes allow even high-rise projects to be primarily concrete-based. So you just have these huge towers, 40-story towers go up, and the usage of steel is far less. Another issue that is very specific to the UAE is that we have a very soft soil here and a very high groundwater table. So basically, in some areas, your groundwater is 2 to 3 meters below the surface. Almost every project you will see needs dewatering, and almost every project requires piling. Anything mid to high rise, definitely you're going to see piling foundations here because the soils just can't support any other type of foundation. So those two sort of elements make a big difference in the construction process. Depending on the area, international markets, obviously it's a very warm, humid climate. Maybe air conditioning is a big deal. Here, air conditioning is the single biggest consideration. The climate here is just, it's vicious during, and we probably run our air conditioning 10 months out of the year. Some people run it year round. So the majority of the new communities in the UAE all have district cooling. Essentially, the master developer puts in a district cooling system, and then a private sector company is incorporated, which basically charges the unit buyers district cooling charges throughout the operational period. But essentially, you're dealing with district cooling in almost every new master plan community here. I think another very significant difference is that labor cost as a percentage of your overall construction cost is quite high in the Western markets as compared to the UAE. Labor cost here is super cheap. You have an abundant supply of unskilled and semi-skilled. I wouldn't say skilled, but definitely unskilled and semi-skilled laborers, usually coming from the Indian subcontinent, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India. And we've seen labor costs sometimes between 3 and 5 times less expensive. It's actually that much of a difference. Again, there's no, well, there's not no, but there's very little regulation in terms of the labor market. You can basically pay people what you want. There's no minimum wage here. You don't have to deal with unions. All the issues that you would see in a Western market relating to labor simply don't exist here. And finally, I think that alternative construction technologies, they're starting to come into the Western markets, I think, in full force. And here, we've barely seen any projects utilizing this. Why? Well, you have not so strict local regulations, and you have such a low build cost. And also the sophistication of the construction programs here is probably 10 years behind Western markets. General contractors in the UAE market still run their business almost as a mom and pop shop, even the big ones. You have some international companies coming in, but even the local ones that have sort of grown, the level of sophistication is far, far less than in the Western market. And so it's very difficult to utilize those alternative construction technologies. Now that is changing. The government is trying to push these into the market, but as of yet, you'll see major projects still be undertaken using, you know, what I would call an old school construction methodology, even for, you know, let's say multi-high-rise tower type of development. I think the most critical thing about the UAE is that almost every development here is run on what we call the master developer business model. So I'll quickly just walk you through this, but this is critical because this is essentially the most common development delivery model. And it's very different than how things work in Western markets. So I've touched on some of these, but I'll just quickly run through this because I think this is absolutely critical. The first thing that happens is that the government incorporates what we call a semi-government development entity. So it creates an LLC or other corporation, government is the majority shareholder. The government then grants land to this new corporate entity, typically at a zero land cost basis, or for 1 dirham, which is essentially 33 cents per square meter. Now, this government-related developer is responsible, and in order to hold title to that land, is responsible for master planning and also installing all infrastructure. So unlike a city like London, where the infrastructure has been in for 100 years, that's not the case here. We're continuously expanding the city, building into the middle of the desert. So unlike in Western markets where the infrastructure is primarily delivered by the government, here it's the master developer that puts in the sewer, the water, the power, builds substations, builds sewage treatment plants, builds district cooling plants. Major infrastructure works are typically undertaken by the master developer, not by the local municipality or equivalent government agency. In order to activate that master plan, the GRE then brings to market an anchor project. So a great example is downtown Dubai. You build Burj Khalifa, you build Dubai Mall, and then you start selling service land plots to what we call in this market sub-developers, which are your private sector companies, such as a Damak or a Sopa. So these developers buy service land plots from the master developer, such as an MR or an Aldar, and they have a development agreement, and they have actual timelines, or they don't just get title to the land. If they fail in their project, the master developer can actually take the land back. So you only essentially get full title to your land once you've completed your project. The sub-developers then bring to market the majority of the master plan assets other than these anchors. Now, these anchors are typically by value the largest components of the master plan. Sub-developers to go forward. As the interest fades, the master developer steps back in and basically completes the remainder of the project after they run out of steam selling land to sub-developers. Another difference here is that much of the infrastructure actually remains the property of the GRE developer in many cases, and there's a service charge system. So it's not always that the roads are handed over to the municipality, for example. You have a lot of cases where the internal road network in a master development is still retained, the ownership is retained by the master developer, and through a service charge model, they recoup the cost of maintenance and operations from the end unit buyers. So this entire service charge system is a big deal also in the UAE. And really, you'll see that secondary market sales only occur once the new community is more or less built out, because new product is constantly coming into the market, either through the master developer or the sub-developer. So, secondary market sales become sort of a much less a component as compared to the Western markets. So just in summary, and these are very, very high level, I wasn't quite sure who the audience is, but I kind of identified 4 trends and the potential opportunities for UK-based companies and what the challenges would be. I think number one, most important, is new and innovative product development typologies. So we're still dealing with your standard resi, office, retail, that's it, right? These sort of more innovative type of retirement housing, healthcare resorts, e-commerce logistics hubs, they're not yet here. We're still 5 to 10 years behind Western markets. So that could be an opportunity for a developer to come in. Obviously, local players are also aware of this, and they're increasing the level of sophistication. So we have, Knight Frank has seen recently that some of these local players are looking to partner with UK or US-based entities in some sort of a partnership, joint venture structure, to deliver something that perhaps is a little bit cutting edge for this market, but may actually be established in the Western market. Again, you have to consider a 5 to 10 year gap in terms of where it's at. Alternative finance, we already talked about. Mezzanine, private equity development, joint venture deal structures, very atypical. Now, there's financial regulations that are coming into the market, and the government is trying to create an environment where these alternative finance mechanisms would be easier. So there's a potential opportunity. However, again, we're 10 to 15 years behind in terms of financial regulation. So would a private equity fund really want to come into the market and fund developments? Questionable. It's something that it would be a high risk endeavor, but certainly the market is very raw. There's probably 2 companies we know of in the entire UAE that deal with mezzanine and private equity. They don't exist here. Green building technologies, absolutely. I think this is huge. The main issue we face here is the low construction cost. So the construction cost here is so low, right, as compared to Western markets, because of the labor cost, regulation, concrete, yada, yada, yada. So the incremental cost to bring in the green building technology in a Western market is like this. In the UAE, it's like this. And that's been really the major challenge. So as regulation here sort of evolves, the government starts giving incentives, I think the green building technologies will start to become more advanced and really utilized at a greater level. But the primary issue is just the construction cost is so low. To give you an example, hard construction costs for a villa could be as low as $75 US a square foot, which is just, I mean, it's unimaginable in the US that you could build for that low of a cost. And obviously these logistic hubs, especially post-COVID, this is also an opportunity for Saudi Arabia. They're 25 years behind, forget about 10 years behind. So this whole idea of logistics hubs and the e-commerce trend, and now with post-COVID, things happening online and being shipped and delivered, that's also, I think, a significant opportunity. The majority of the industrial assets currently in the UAE and KSA are old. They don't match the modern specifications. It has to be completely redone. So I think that's a significant development opportunity as well. So sorry, I think I've gone a little bit more than the 10 minutes, Phil. I'm going to end this and pass it back. And thank you very much, everybody, for your time.
Sorry, Phil, do you want me to? Yeah, I'll
ready to jump on? Yes, please.
Absolutely. I'm just going to share my screen. Let me know when you can see it. Are you able to see it? Okay.
All systems go. Yeah.
Great. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm assuming it is afternoon there as well now. My name is Vasustri Mohta, and I'm Design Director for the Middle East for Master Planning for WS Atkins. Now, just to give you a background actually about Atkins, we are a multidisciplinary engineering consultancy, engineering and design consultancy. And we've got a variety of infrastructure, master planning, transportation, architecture, landscape. So basically all the disciplines that are required in the process of design and development of real estate and infrastructure projects. Just a bit about myself. I've lived in the region for over 15 years and worked here out of Dubai. I am an architect and urban designer by training, and I've got experience in both public and private sector master plan and site plan projects across the region, including the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Kuwait. I've also worked in the UK and in India. Just to give you a little bit of background about the country that we're talking about, so United Arab Emirates, we've got a total population of about 9.5 million. Abu Dhabi is the capital, and as you can see in terms of land area, it is the largest emirate. So just in case, for those who don't know, it is a union of 7 emirates. So there is a federal government that overlooks the sort of federal and the interconnectivity between the emirates. And then there are individual emirate governments for each of the 7 emirates. In terms of the major drivers that I think has caused the growth and sort of the interest in this country is that there is a visionary leadership, particularly in Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and also in the other sort of northern emirates or the 5 emirates, which are lesser known. It is a modern, tolerant community. I think sort of if you look at the photographs of Dubai and Abu Dhabi, this is like anywhere else in the world, and different kinds of nationalities and religions coexist in quite comfortably. There is an economic diversification agenda in general at the federal level to take it away from the energy-driven economy to more diversified tourism and industrial economy. And there is a huge tourism focus, I think, with Emirates and Etihad. The United Arab Emirates is a major hub for tourism and for transit passengers. In terms of focus, what we've seen, after all of the sort of mega developments that have happened over the last 15 years or so, there is now a greater emphasis on making the cities more livable. So quality of life and well-being based on international benchmarking indexes have become really important. So you often see Abu Dhabi and Dubai trying to be on those lists for, the most livable cities or trying to climb up the list, as it were. There is a focus on making doing business much easier. And this has been the case, I think, through the development of JAFZA and other free zones in Dubai, and then KZAD in Abu Dhabi. So this is kind of trying to promote the economic agenda. And there is a lot of focus on making the cities and governance smart, sustainable, and future-proof. So I think Dubai has become a benchmark in the region and even internationally on smart governance. Just looking at the type of projects, so being sort of looking at the master planning and strategic planning side of things in the region for the last 15 years, we've seen largely 4 types or categories of projects that we get involved in. So there are the national level plans, which are generally by the federal government or by the ministries. And these would include national transportation frameworks, including things like Etihad Rail. So there is a major rail project that's connecting all of the 7 emirates and indeed intended to connect all of GCC. And then also other provision of public facilities and amenities, particularly in the more remote areas of UAE that a lot of people are not necessarily familiar with. Then there are emirate level plans, which are by local authorities and by the emirates itself. So these are growth plans and spatial plans and vision plans to plan for their infrastructure development, their land for the various different types of land uses, like national housing, which is a requirement to be given to every national upon turning the age of 18. They're given either a piece of land or a house. and also looking at investment land, so ensuring that they have that ability to provide land for investor-led projects. And then I think what Kaveh spoke about, there is a lot of this public or quasi-public sector-led projects, and also the developer-led master plan projects, which are effectively also in most cases have a large government stake. So in terms of the quasi sort of public sector projects, we've got major public transportation projects, so the metros in the different Emirates or tram systems, looking at public realm enhancement or public parks within these cities, national housing, as I said, the requirement for plots of land and houses for nationals, and then cultural and social amenities, so creating the museums and the infrastructure for providing a cultural and social framework for these cities. And then finally is the developer-led master plan projects, which is what tends to be more visible, I think, for the international market. This is more investment-based, and these can be a variety of different projects. There is the residential focused master plan, so we have large layouts of villas and townhouses which are being developed in the suburbs. Obviously, we have the mixed-use master plans, which tend to be the more iconic developments, whether it's Dubai Eye or it's Burj Khalifa. These are kind of large mixed-use master plans which have all different types of uses, and then the lifestyle tourism destinations, which will have more of your hospitality and iconic elements, which put sort of the cities on the global map. In terms of the kind of projects, I'll just go through a range of projects that we've been involved in over the years. So I'm going through from sort of the top level to the investor-led project. So this was something that we did for the Ministry of Infrastructure Development, was then called the Ministry of Public Works. And it was looking at all of the remote areas, which is the 5 Emirates in the north, and the provision of infrastructure and public amenities within these Emirates, and also looking at sort of response times from the point of a lot of these villages are quite remote and they're very small, so providing facilities in each one of these villages is obviously not logical. So it was the idea of creating hubs within these remote areas where facilities would be provided, and ensuring that there was adequate infrastructure to provide accessibility for all of these remote settlements to be able to access it easily. And a large amount of public consultation was undertaken to ensure that all of the citizens that live in these areas are well provided for. And we've been involved in a variety of sort of Emirates spatial plans. This one is for the smallest Emirate in the Emirates, which is Ajman. As you can see, it's fast running out of land, and it is a major dormitory for Dubai, because a lot of the affordable housing for Dubai is either based in Sharjah or in Ajman. So this was a framework plan for 2030, which we did almost 5 years ago now, identifying the different types of land uses and the quantums that they have to plan for the growth up to the year 2030. This particular project is something that we're doing currently in Abu Dhabi. It's for national housing, and it is based in an area called Al Nahda. Again, these national housing areas, they're basically, if I just go to the next slide, they're basically large areas of national housing villas. And there is a great emphasis on ensuring that there is adequate provision of public amenities, open space, connectivity in terms of cycling and pedestrian routes, and ensuring sort of the quality of life parameters and indexes that they're trying to achieve. I think moving on to more of the investment-led projects, this is in Abu Dhabi. It's on Yas Island, so you can see the Ferrari theme park in the background. It's on the water canal. The canal has been dredged through Yas Island to make sure that it's navigable, and a lot of sort of housing projects, which are predominantly for investors, being developed. This particular one is currently under construction. They are mid-rise residential buildings with a sort of waterfront setting, and again the focus really on creating sort of the lifestyle of providing a waterfront, a retail hub, amenities for the private amenities for the residents themselves, and providing sort of that investment product. So a lot of these have already been launched, and they sold out really quickly. So obviously there is and continues to be a demand for this kind of product in the market. Another really interesting project that we are involved in Abu Dhabi is Saadiyat. This is a mixed-use area, and it's surrounded by the 3 iconic museums. So the Louvre is already open and is a major art museum in Abu Dhabi. The Guggenheim that you can see in the background there, which is now under construction, and the Zayed National Museum, which is also under construction. And sort of Grove sits as a mixed-use destination in between the 3 museums. It's a major retail, residential, and hotel precinct, which is currently under construction again. So again, this is an investment-led project, and it's trying to create that social and lifestyle dimension for the city. So as you can see, I think the approach is changing a lot in terms of how the cities want to develop. So the pedestrian and the cyclist are becoming far more important than they have traditionally been, where it's been very car dominated. Public transport, personal transportation is becoming much more significant. The density is increasing in some of these precincts to ensure that you've got that environment where this is possible. Another kind of project in Dubai that we've been involved in is called Wasl. This is an infill site, and interestingly, it became quite attractive when the metro station came into existence in close proximity to the site. So it was the first sort of planned transit-oriented development. It's a high-density development relying heavily on the metro station as its means of transportation, because traditionally here you rely on the car, and the sort of traffic impact study is the most important thing that determines the density that you can achieve on a site. But in this particular case, the public transit share was raised, and we were able to achieve much higher density on this site, and it's one of its kind infill development, again residential, offices, retail, and lifestyle led. And in this particular case, it's surrounded by parkland, so it's actually got the added advantage of having fantastic views all around it. A project that's almost delivered. I'm sure you've seen pictures of Dubai Eye, or Ain Dubai as it's called. It's on an island off Dubai Marina, which is one of the densest areas in terms of residential development in Dubai. This is again a lifestyle destination, tourist destination. It's got hotels, it's got the Ferris wheel, residential, and a souk-style retail surrounded by water and beaches along the hotels. Again, a project that's almost complete and operational. I think the Ain Dubai itself is due to open soon. So just a few views of the hotels. So we did the master plan for this project, and we also delivered 2 of the hotels in terms of architecture and site supervision. And lastly, I think there are a lot of these retail precincts, particularly moving away from the mall-based retail precincts to more sort of open street-based retail destinations. So this is one in the older part of Dubai along Dubai Creek, where sort of through a regeneration, Miras, which is a sort of a retail destination specialist developer in Dubai, they developed this destination with a lot of retail and F&B hotels, and it's become quite successful as both a tourist and a destination for the local residents. It's just a few pictures of that. So that's really all from me. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Mohammed in case he's been able to join the call. Sorry.
Hi, Mohammed.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Okay, if you could press the hide, just press that hide button on the edge of stop sharing, Mohammed, and that will get that off the screen. Can you see that?
Not yet.
There's a little box in the middle of your presentation that says stop sharing and then hide. if you click on hide. Sorry, that sharing worked fine. I just want to click on the hide box, the hide button. Can you see that?
Yes, I can see now.
Okay, that's perfect. That's all very clear. Over to you, Mohammed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Mohammed Higazi, Senior Technical Director at WSP in the Middle East. And I have been working in the Emirates of Dubai over the past 20 years. I have a PhD degree in engineering management with thesis on risk and analysis of construction industry and markets overall. And today we'll run you through some information related to this aspect. If we start talking about WSP as a business, we are a multidisciplinary consultancy around the globe, over 50,000 experts, 550 offices, over 40 countries, 5 continents, and thousands of projects has been constructed to date, in addition to the ongoing on the pipeline. Our biggest value add in the Middle East that we think international and still act local. We have been working in the Middle East over 48 years and globally 135 years. Our presence in the Middle East between various countries in the Gulf region, KSA, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, Oman, and Kuwait. Our specialties and expertise are property and buildings, transport and infrastructure, power and water, environment and sustainability, design and supervision activities, in addition to project management services. These are some of the projects which WSP have been working on over the past years, and we are tied up with signature architects around the globe, either with a presence in the UAE market or through other countries globally from our international offices. One JBR is a signature residential and commercial tower in the Jumeirah Beach Residences. In Dubai, the engineering marvel by Miras, set to become the world's largest observation wheel around the world. Palm Jumeirah, groundbreaking land development involving bridges, roads, marine structure, utilities, power and water, and tunneling. In addition to Dubai Integrated Rail Master Planning, using a GIS to help the client implement a rail master plan, meeting and exceeding the city needs. Yes, Bay Waterfront Destination is another project in Abu Dhabi, one of the landmark upcoming to in 2021 Q4 to operational. Dubai Mall, of course, making the world's largest mall even bigger, with a lot of expansion and changes, modifications to amaze all the visitors and the residents in Dubai. The Polish Pavilion at Expo 2020, another signature project with the collaboration of WSP in Poland, is currently ongoing for the Expo 2021 opening in October. Supervision and O&M of Sheikh Zayed Tunnel, bridges and corridor. This is set to become the longest tunnel in the Middle East. In addition to those, we have been working on the Dubai Integrated Rail Master Planning, sports projects including Hazza bin Zayed Stadium in Abu Dhabi, and Mashrak Bank headquarters at the downtown Burj Dubai. If you look back to Dubai, in the Emirates in general, and Dubai in particular, you will see 1990, this is the startup of the development of this amazing city. And in 2005, you can see a major development has occurred over these short durations, only 15 years. And this has continued to grow further and amaze us with the iconic structure that has been built. Currently, you can see a photo of Burj Khalifa, the tallest man-made tower around the world, in addition to a lot of signature and iconic buildings surrounding this city, which give you a confidence of this vision and leadership of the Dubai government and UAE government in general to allow for investors to come and work and deliver services, similar as WSP also providing these global and international consultancy services. Through the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a lot of changes and a lot of government requirements and measures for all the countries to secure the citizens and expats on the land. In the UAE, this measures has been implemented, and there has been a strict implementation to these requirements, whether from the Dubai leadership, DHA and MOH as well, to ensure the safety and the well-being of the residents and the expats. The construction sector has been impacted by this, mainly in the supply chain and delay of deliveries due to the airport and the transportation impacts. However, the construction sector has been identified as a vital sector for the government, and all the operations has resumed, maintaining all the precautionary measures, social distancing, and in addition to other requirements during the sterilization program in 2020. Very few projects has stopped. Majority have resumed, some of it with less manpower, but manageable to give the boost to the country where this vital sector should not be impacted. The construction industry has the ability to deliver multiplex and signature projects in the UAE and in Dubai in particular. Therefore, various companies has resumed, as I have explained just now, and maintained operations. I'll give you a strong example about the upcoming Dubai Icon One Zaabil project, which a development by Ithra Dubai, the investment corporation of Dubai development arm. WSP is the engineering consultancy for this amazing project. It includes 2 towers, 69 and 59 floors, residential, ultra-luxury hotel, retail, offices, and ICD headquarters. Both towers are connected 100 meters above the ground with the iconic feature of One Zaabil, which is the link. The link itself, it hosts the longest occupied cantilevered building and has been assessed for this during the recent Guinness World Record reviews. This project has maintained operations during the pandemic, giving you a clear message and an idea on how the government has reacted and how the importance of maintaining the development ongoing within the country, as well as attracting the visitors and attracting all the people who want to invest in the country with the confidence that the government put in their abilities and projects. In addition to all these, the Dubai Development Authority has also taken several steps to mitigate the impact of COVID-19, introducing digital platform for application process and submissions of building permit and construction permit and NOCs, minimizing any kind of physical meetings or interaction, having a smooth operations, moving to all standard practice business requirement as possible. They have introduced, in addition to these, virtual inspections taking place by the Dubai municipality and Dubai Civil Defense, which have helped a lot all projects to continue and achieve the requirement for the stages completions, as well obtaining the certificates with this amazing platform that has been established. In addition to all that, the announcement of the planning development stimulus initiatives was also great by reducing the fees for the building permits. Another permits for waivers or exceptional has been extended over 12 months to ensure the cash flow is still maintained with the developer and investors. The UAE federal government have also released a variety of fiscal stimulus packages to elevate the impact of COVID-19 on the economy, reducing the cost of doing the business with significant reductions in government fees, debt relief, and reducing payment of companies. In addition, reducing electricity and water consumption bills for commercial and industrial activities, providing easy installments all the way through. Central Bank also has launched a comprehensive economic support plan. Consumers, individuals, and companies have benefited from this who have been affected for the COVID-19 global pandemic. So the Security and Commodities Authority have also issued several decisions to support the financial market in the country. These decisions include improving funding and installments provisions, with another several plans to allow for cash boosting within these companies and support the economic in general. All these has been supported and directed from the government to minimize the debt relief and provide the debt relief and reduce costs to the companies and their families as well. Dubai Future Strategy is based on having the people and society at the core. Prosperity, diversity, tolerance, and multiculturalism are some of the heard information that has been provided as a headers to unify the Emirates development directions element and continue to attract the wide range of nationalities to live in the country. It's worth to note, Dubai is one of the world's first destinations reopened for tourism, has promoted itself as the ideal pandemic vacation spot, with great thanks to the government and health sector preventive measures that have been implemented, ensuring the safety and the well-being of the visitors and residents. As Dubai continues to cement its reputation as thriving global business, tourism, and retail hubs, the real estate sector, in particular the residence market, is expected to thrive and continue to be an integral part of the economy, with a lot of investors are coming to the country and booming the economy further to amaze us with the new projects in the pipeline that will continue to grow the city as the plans set for the 2040. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed. If you could stay on the stage for me there, and Vasu and Kaveh, if you would like to turn your cameras back on and join me on stage. Fabulous presentations, thank you. We don't have that much time for questions now, so I just want to whiz through some of the questions that the audience have asked. I'm going to come to each of you in turn rather than ask you all to comment on the questions. I'll go to the first one that was posed probably during your presentation, Kaveh, that says, to all speakers, but Kaveh, my perception of the market seems to be very much a boom-bust market and difficult to read. Is this true? How does the next 5 years look to you? That's a good question to ask somebody from Knight Frank, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all relative. As compared to established markets, I would consider it boom bust. The fluctuations are much greater. However, since the 2008 financial crisis, so many regulatory changes have been made here and to, I would say, stabilize the market, that we don't anticipate that level of boom bust happening here again. I would consider the curve to look like this. It was big, and then the next cycle will be smaller, and then it's going to get smaller and smaller. And over the next 10 years, I think it'll approach something, maybe not necessarily in America or UK, but close. And it's all about moving from a frontier market to an emerging market, and then eventually to a maturing market.
Okay. Thank you, Kaveh. Vasu, Laura Burgoyne asked the question, I came to a Cityscape conference a few years ago. Do these still take place? Are they good events for learning about the industry in UAE?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the Cityscape still does take place, and it is a good snapshot of the projects that are going on in the UAE and, in fact, in the region as well, because you have participation from different regions. There are obviously different ones. There is one in Dubai, there is one in Abu Dhabi, and there is now another one in Riyadh as well. The Dubai one typically was the one that attracted the most number of visitors and exhibitors. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but for sure it is a great platform to see what all is going on.
Yeah, I think I came out to one of those in 2008, which was, well, we were boom times back in 2008. I don't think the Burj Khalifa hadn't been built then. I think it was still being planned in 2008, if I remember rightly. But yeah, how things have changed. Mohammed, thank you for your persistence in terms of the tech. I do appreciate you coming on. I know you had a few problems. Jeff Chaucer from RW Project Services says, how quickly do you think the UAE will recover from COVID? Will it bounce back?
Well, I believe that the recovery has started compared to any other country in the world very fast. And you can see that the majority of the construction projects ongoing, and there are several mega jobs are being maintained in operations. As the example I mentioned, One Zabil, and also we have another job, one of the major jobs starting in Abu Dhabi in the next few months. So we can see that it started to come back, probably not with the same number of the projects happening simultaneously, but it's a very good sign for the recovery and a vital symptoms of the improvement being developed in the country. I would say that by Q4 22, you would see the development course back on track in the UAE in general, with a lot of investment opportunity has been adopted in the last previous months, and it will continue till next year. So we can see signs of additional projects coming on the pipeline back to the norm.
Okay. You think it's going to be as late as Q4 2022 before things get back to normal? Yeah.
Yes, I would say that to get it to the full swing, see, in 2019 Q1, it was recorded the highest booming month in terms of construction sectors. So to reach to the same level of development ongoing, this would take till Q3 to Q4 22. But we will see amazing jobs going on. We have been receiving a lot of bids for design happening this year. And of course, the design need 6 to 8 months prior to go to construction.
Okay. Joseph Roswell asked me a question, and he posted it about half an hour ago. I've been sort of looking at that, sort of saying, when are built environment networking come to the UAE? I sort of want to turn that a question to you guys, really, because we bring people together to talk about procurement and to network, similar way to Cityscape, I guess, Vasu, in many respects. But does the market need an organization like us? Would we be able to add any value to the market in the UAE? If I can come to you, Vasu, on that one. Do you think we could add value to the UAE by running our sort of conferences out there?
I mean, I think yes, but I wonder if place is that important anymore. I mean, we're all talking on Built Environment Network at the moment on Zoom. And I think we're all adding value sitting where we are at the moment. So I'm not sure if any physical presence is needed, but definitely a lot more engagement can happen, I think, within the different parties involved in this in the UAE, which I don't think happens as much at the moment. Obviously, there are these sort of events that happen like Cityscape, but it's kind of wrapped up in 2 days. It's kind of also a sales event while a bit of networking event. So it would definitely benefit, but I'm not sure if you need to physically come here, but definitely a lot more engagement can be done.
Oh, that's a very good point, actually, in terms of our carbon footprint will be a lot better if we stay in the UK as opposed to coming across. But so I just, the final question from me, and we're overrunning slightly, so please forgive me. But the final question is do you think the UAE needs more support from the UK? Are there real opportunities for people to come? I'm going to go to Kaveh, and then Mohammed, and then I'll finish with you, Vasu. But I just wondered what your thoughts were, Kaveh.
I think there are opportunities. I think that the opportunities are in very specific niches which the local companies here are not capable of executing. The advantages that an Emirati company has and a local Gulf national has in the market is too great to be against. So it's a matter of supplementing and filling the hole in the market rather than coming in and sort of competing. So there's various niches around what they simply cannot do because it's too sophisticated, requires a level of professional expertise, is something new. And I think those are where the opportunities are, whether it's in development or construction or professional services.
Okay, thank you, Kaveh. Mohammed?
I do agree that there is a lot of opportunity required investors to come over and start realizing the importance of being and working physically in the Middle East, and in particular UAE and Dubai. This city has a great leadership and visionary rulers who have been putting a plan. If you have been watching the media and even some the shots I have included in the presentation of the growth of the country over the past 30 years, it's really beyond amazing levels. So the level of confidence for the investors to come to UAE and start supporting the investment opportunities in the country is really important, and not only from the UK and also from other countries where these opportunities are appropriate. It's an important city and it's keep growing. They have set now the plans for the next 50 years. They have signed these plans for the next 50 years from now on, and they are working towards achieving these goals to have a further improvement and development to the city and get it more amazing than it's currently being.
Okay, thank you, Mohammed. Vasu, final word to you.
Yeah, so I think the opportunity, in my opinion, is in innovation. I think there is a lot of interest in innovation in the region in general. UAE, Saudi Arabia, everywhere, smart systems, smart solutions, better parking arrangements, how to make them more efficient infrastructure in general. And given the speed at which we operate, everything should have been done yesterday. That's our problem in consultancy. I think there is a huge opportunity to bring innovation into the market from the West, where I think there is more time and more thought being given to some of these things, and it can easily be brought into this market because the market is very receptive to innovation.
Okay, that's great. Well, look, thank you very much for your time. I do appreciate you coming on today. It's really interesting. Mohammed, if you're able to send us a copy of your presentation, that would be great. So thank you. Kaveh, Mohammed, and Vasu, thank you very much for joining us. Fascinating presentations, and we very much appreciate your time. Thank you. Thank you for coming. So, ladies and gents, there was a really interesting insight into UAE. So, what a marketplace, and some of the images of the construction projects there were superb, and it was particularly interesting, I think, to hear a little bit about the differences between the UK and the UAE. So a really interesting summary there in terms of what potential players need to do. And we heard it at the end there in terms of partnership and JV, very much the way to go. The market will be back up to full speed by the end of 2022. And it's interesting in terms of innovation and technology, in terms of what UAE can learn from the West, but also what the West can learn from UAE. So I just wanted to say thank you again to our speakers, and thank you to our partners, Wilmot Dixon, Faithful and Gould, View City, Waterman, Soccertech, Newformer, Lead Associates, Cornerstone, CLS, Barber ABI, and Pagabo. And thank you very much for taking time to listen to our webinar today. Have a great week. See you at one of our events very soon. Thank you.